While Super Tuesday is incredibly important for the presidential race, it is also key for the House and for the Senate. States with major races include Massachusetts, Texas, California, and North Carolina.
Joining us now to explain what he's looking at is the Intercept's D.C. Bureau Chief, Ryan Grimm. Ryan, great to see you, man.
Good to see you.
Ryan, what's on your radar? Tell us. Give us your magical insight. First, I guess let's start with some House races, right? So, you have your eye on a few things. This has been chronically undercovered, and I think we want to make sure that the audience knows that it's not just the, not just what's up for grabs. What are the primary races that you have your eye on right now?
So the fun one, obviously Jessica Cisneros, a big race, trying to take on Henry Cuellar. But I think is a more fun one in California, Georgette Gomez against Sarah Jacobs. So Georgette Gomez got the endorsement of Ocasio-Cortez a couple weeks ago. The left has really consolidated around her, even though there's a candidate kind of further to her left, but just never got off the ground. And it's become a two-person race between her and this candidate, Sarah Jacobs, who ran in 2018 in a completely different district, a campaign significantly funded by her grandfather, who's a billionaire from Oracle.
Oh, great.
And so
Must be nice.
Now she moved to a new district. She lost to Mike Levine, who then went on to win the general. She moved to a new district, her grandfather, again, pumping hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into this race to get his granddaughter through the runoff. So because of all the spending that he's doing, she's going to make it. But the question is, does Georgette Gomez become the second Democrat, and then you have a runoff? So it'll be a test. It'll be a test of AOC's strength, whether or not an endorsement from her, kind of a week ahead of the campaign and activity from her PAC, can kind of push her in there. Jim Costa is another under-the-radar race. He's one of the most conservative Democrats in a fairly blue district. Doesn't get the attention of Lipinski and Cuellar, but he has a challenger as well, and very, very well could go into a runoff. So those are two to watch. Then you have a bunch of interesting ones in Texas as well.
Well, talk to us a little bit more about Texas. Take us especially inside Cisneros' chances. I mean, on the one hand, she's had a lot of money come in, a lot of excitement around her campaign and what she's doing, the way she's running the race, endorsements, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, Cuellar is sort of an establishment figure there. Soccer's been educating me on just how tight a grip he has on the area. So does she have a realistic chance to knock him off tonight?
Well, we'll see. And Soccer's right. So Henry Cuellar is kind of like the boss of this district.
Literally.
He's not just the member of Congress. He's the man that
runs it.
It's like patronage. That literally is how it works.
And in Robert Caro's fourth LBJ book, he tells this amazing story of how LBJ basically stole Texas from
these counties,
using these counties where more people voted than lived. In those
the Duke
counties.
Of Duval.
Everybody focuses on Illinois, but they stole Texas too. They stole that whole election.
Well, let's not talk about JFK in West Virginia too. That's a whole other story.
So we'll see. On the other hand, the race has become a serious one. The press is covering it, and so voters understand that there's now a choice between this new candidate, Jessica Cisneros, and this guy who's been there forever, Henry Cuellar. And so if it was just a referendum on Henry Cuellar, everybody loves Henry Cuellar. But now that people understand that he might actually lose, and there's a chance to actually kind of turn the page into a new type of politics, I think this is going to be a lot closer than people think, and I think she has a decent chance to actually pull off an upset.
This is another test of AOC, is that right? AOC is endorsed her, or
yes,
she not?
Yes, but to her discredit, she got in very late on this race. Emily's List got in for Jessica Cisneros before AOC did.
I saw that was interesting, and because that was like the first
that was
establishment.
Right. This was not we'll check the box.
Right.
NARAL, Planned Parenthood, has probably spent $1 million to back Jessica Cisneros in this race, while the Kochs and other people are spending huge amounts of money.
And Nancy Pelosi, don't forget.
And Nancy Pelosi and the Kochs.
So, I mean, primaries aside, Ryan, I mean, I think the audience would love just your take on what the hell's gone on in the last 24 hours. Were you surprised by it? I'm frankly in awe. I didn't think they had the ability to do this. I really thought they were so incompetent. These people can't even run a caucus.
Right.
But they went all in on Joe Biden.
Well, they say nothing concentrates the mind like a hangman's noose. So they would have preferred to dither for weeks in between, the time that they normally have from South Carolina into Super Tuesday. They didn't have it. They had days, and so they had to scramble And to their credit, they scrambled. They even found Beto's cell phone number and dragged him back out.
Shaved his beard. They're like, get out there, Beto.
Make it happen, Beto.
Yeah. And, we'll find out tonight, how this goes. But there is certainly an argument that Bernie Sanders can still emerge as the winner tonight. Mm-hmm. People are probably overestimating how many votes Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, and Beto O'Rourke are able to bring with them. All of their supporters are highly educated people.
Right.
These are college grads and above, a lot of post-college too, who studied the race, who took this very seriously throughout the last year, understood that Joe Biden was the guy that the establishment thought was the best person to beat Donald Trump. They looked at it closely, and they said no. And they went with Buttigieg, they went with Klobuchar, they went Beto. They bounced
Warren.
around to Warren.
Right.
Some of them went to Bernie because they're convinced of the electability. The idea that they would have made that decision and they will unmake it because Pete Buttigieg tells them to, might be expecting a little bit too much of Pete Buttigieg's persuasive powers to these voters. And so if Bernie can have this rapid consolidation around Joe Biden and still come out on top, that makes him look like what Larry David called him, indestructible.
Yeah.
And that gives him a sense of momentum. And also, every time the establishment comes at him, it reinforces his own brand, that he's the guy who actually is going to do what he promises.
Well,
and so other people are like, oh, well, if Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar and everybody is allying against him, then there must be something right about him.
I mean, it is a true test now of his case versus Biden's case, right? Of that restoration argument, Trump's an aberration, just go with me, I'm the safe choice, et cetera, versus we got to do something new here.
Right.
And these people are all in the tank together, and they are standing in the way of working class people actually having power and have a say in this country. I think for a certain segment of the public, it does backlash to have all these people saying, no, you can't have this choice, right? You can't have this thing. And I reminded, as you're speaking, of the fact that, ahead of Iowa, Liz Warren gets the New York Times half endorsement, right? She gets Julian Castro, jumps in for her. There was a lot of media coverage around that. He really goes in hard on the trail for her. Didn't ultimately amount to much. The only establishment figure that we've seen so far who really had that impact was Jim Clyburn. I mean, according to the exit polls, the fact that he endorsed in that state and had this particular connection with that specific community really changed the tides in that state. Do these other people, Pete and Amy and whoever, Beto, they don't have this long connection with the country or with these communities the way that a Clyburn does.
Right. And the thing that gets at is the connection between a politician and a social base. Clyburn has one. He's an iconic civil rights leader.
Yes.
He's a revered figure in South Carolina who has not stopped organizing. Black churches are still strong, and he's able to move people by the weight of his kind of moral clarity. Even as we might criticize a lot of what he does in Washington back home, he's still very much considered a leader of people. Amy Klobuchar, Buttigieg, these are not leaders of people. These are people who are clearly ambitious politicians, with a degree of talent, but they don't have a social base that they're bringing with them. Clearly, Castro didn't either. As Castro has run around the country supporting Warren, you haven't seen her poll numbers move. And you're right. This fight had to happen at some point, and so this is shaping up to be a fairly clean contest between those two questions that you laid out. And it's one that Sanders has the advantage because he had the momentum going into it. He's got all those early votes banked, and he's got Bloomberg soaking up all these boomer votes,
right?
Boomer plus votes.
Yeah.
That would very likely otherwise be going to Biden. So
on the other hand, there's also Warren.
Right.
Their super PAC.
I wanted to ask
him with
about
progressives.
Ryan. You've maintained good relations with their team and the campaign. What are they thinking right now? Because right now you've got the establishment has their man. They went all in for him.
Right.
The progressives appear to be, she, longtime ideological ally, is playing no more than a role of a spoiler for the Sanders campaign. Does she not see that, and does she just not care? So
here's the thing we always have to remind ourselves of, and I have to remind myself of this sometimes, that when a candidate is in the campaign, they're still running, they're struggling, and they're explaining to you why they're still in, don't listen to that. It's nonsense. They can't be honest about why exactly they're still in. If they can't say, you know what, I'm going to watch how I do on Super Tuesday, and if I get less than 10% in a lot of these states, then I'm going to drop out.
Right, because everyone will flee them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The way that Republicans slammed Obama when he was like, I'm going to send 30,000 troops to Afghanistan, and then they're all going to leave in 9 months.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not so. But that's the best. That's the best strategy.
Yeah.
So if you announce that you're quitting before you quit, then you've quit. And so therefore, you need a rationale for why you're staying in. And so she's come up with complicated rationales that explain why she's staying in, that we should not take literally.
Okay.
And sometimes I take them too literally, and I get frustrated. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Like, oh, it's not supposed to make sense.
With that in mind, if she loses in Massachusetts tonight, which we don't know, she may pull it off, right? But if she loses in Massachusetts tonight, doesn't win a single state Super Tuesday, do you think she does get out? Because part of, I was thinking this through in a very similar way to you. I was like, okay, if you want to project to people that you're in it for the long haul, what's the best way to prove that? Is to make that ad buy that she made down the road, whether or not you actually intend to go through with it or not. That's a great way of saying, see, look, I'm really in it for the long haul. Come out and vote for me. Stick with me. Let's see what the best is that we can do on Super Tuesday. So do you think that she does drop out if it's not a good night for her tonight?
Probably, but it depends on where the where the line is.
Yeah.
So if she doesn't collect delegates, then then there's really no her path requires delegate collection, and any advantage that she accrues to the Sanders campaign requires her to be collecting delegates. So like the Working Families Party, for instance, is still supporting her. Basically, by this point, on the premise that she's soaking up delegates that would otherwise go to Joe Biden, because she's lost most of the left to Bernie Sanders. He has consolidated that. So if tonight we see that she actually went up a little bit because Pete and Amy dropped out, then she's soaking up voters that would otherwise be going to Biden, because they had a choice of going to Bernie and they didn't. So if that's the case, and as you saw, Bernie has a slim shot of getting a majority at this point of delegates. But if you can combine Bernie and then 10% Warren. Then then WFP supports her staying in. She has a plausible case to stay in, and then she can stay in and telling herself, well, anything can happen
That's interesting.
At this point. But if she's under that, then
what are you doing?
I do think she's going to win some delegates tonight. She's just above that 16% threshold and very well could win her own home state. So thank you, Ryan. We appreciate it.
We're going to see. Ryan, great to have you. Thank you. Coming up, Team Rising's predictions on how Super Tuesday is going to play out when Rising continues.